Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Reacts, and this is R Claws OP by the channel TierZoo. It's been a while since I did a TierZoo video. They are always amazing. I've watched a lot of it already. If you haven't seen them, check out the playlist in the description, I guess. So R Claws OP, yeah, I think so, right? I mean, there's a reason why in our, in anything in our society, if there's a saying for it, like put your claws away, this and that, right? It probably implies that claws are really OP. So yeah, with the raptors and eagles and being so powerful, I guess it's because of the claws, right? Claws and obviously tigers, right? Tigers' claws and everything. They can just maul people bare. So yeah, claws are OP, I guess. But yeah, we'll see. Oh, TierZoo, because TierZoo talk about all the different type of, casual geographic, I guess briefly touch topics and briefly talk about some FYI type of things, while TierZoo goes really deep into it, right? So sometimes you know something instinctively, like this has to be true. It's probably not. TierZoo basically tells you that, like, science doesn't align with that. So it's always fun to see where you're wrong. So yeah, let's watch it. Well, there you go.
When speccing your character, it's important to choose equipment that integrates well with your chosen build's combat style and minimizes its inherent vulnerabilities. Weapons like horns and fangs are capable of inflicting massive damage, but using them in battle can leave a player vulnerable to counterattacks, and their value is mostly limited to 1v1 situations. Balancing the risk and damage potential of launching an attack is a key strategic consideration when equipping any type of weapon. So today we'll discuss one that comes as a standard feature on many of the most viable builds in the game: claws. Claws are versatile, close-range weapons that can be used for offense or defense without sacrificing much in terms of mobility. They do require the user to get somewhat close to an enemy to launch an attack, but due to the low end lag on most standard slashing and swiping claw strikes, these tend to be one of the safest attack options a player has access to. Unlike some other weapons, claws can usually be regenerated if damaged, allowing them to be used freely with minimal risk. Claws—
I don't know why it hurts. Just seeing that crab just ripping it all, like, oh god. So yeah, claws, one of the most versatile weapon ever, right? If somebody was describing some kind of description, it would be like, oh, there you go, claws, deadly, versatile, from small to big, anybody can use it.
Can be used against multiple enemies at once if the build has decent mobility, making them an excellent choice for generalists and tanks alike. They can also be specialized into a variety of secondary perks that allow the user to climb, dig, or run at extreme speeds without slipping. Claws can be optimized for piercing, slashing, or crushing damage depending on which basic type you spec into. While some members of the arthropod faction have tiny hooked claws that are used for the mobility perks alone, others equip pincher-type claws called chelae that can inflict massive crushing damage. The size of chelae relative to the user's body varies between build classes, but they can be used in combat even on the smaller end due to the additional perk of being able to immobilize opponents. Crustacean builds like crabs and lobsters can use claws to crush or dismember prey, a devastating attack if it connects, though it can be fairly easily dodged by more mobile players. Scorpions can use their claws to inflict knockback or as a physical barrier to keep an enemy away from their vitals, but they also enable them to use an extremely powerful grappling combination move. While an enemy is immobilized in their claws, scorpions use their flexible stingers to inflict massive piercing and venom damage. This attack is more effective than crushing alone, but the trade-off between physical power and venom potency means that some scorpions are still weak against builds that can deflect or withstand their stings. Instead of modifying entire limbs into crushing pinchers, many tetrapod builds can equip individual claws to each digit and then use them to inflict piercing or slashing damage. Reptile and mammal builds that spec into claws usually equip them to all 4 limbs, using them for combat as well as their broad array of secondary functions. Tetrapod builds in earlier expansions experimented with a variety of claw specializations, with TierZoo.
Alright, first off with claws, when you really think about it, it's really simple, right? Your fingers, right? So why not put some pointy things at that in top of it, just to basically, for anything, gripping, hurting somebody, defense. It kind of makes sense why so many different animals have the claws. And when it comes to claws, obviously I might be just, might be just wrong here. It's probably gonna be. But I guess the strongest claw damage could be from the tigers, right? Tiger's claw swipe is way too deadly. I remember, seeing some kind of a stats somewhere, right? Where basically they showed that tiger's claw is so deadly they can rip an entire lion's jaw away with just one swipe or something, or break a moderately sized wall or something. I mean, that's just fucked up.
Dinosaurs dumping the most evolution points into the trait of any build in history. These giant curved claws were primarily used to hook and pull vegetation in order to access the best loot, but they served the secondary function of being used to attack or intimidate predators in a similar strategy to that of anteaters in the current meta. Megatherium is another example of a build that went all in on claws, but theirs were specialized to withstand the impacts of intense digging, and thus were much more powerful in combat as a result. Although Megatherium were large enough to repel most enemies using intimidation alone, succeeding in a meta where Smilodon were the apex predators meant that their claws needed to be ready for serious action when necessary. While Thenocerosaurus and Megatherium are no longer playable builds, the basic tetrapod claw specializations that they pioneered are still influential in today's meta. While some mammal variants spec into nails or hooves instead, claws are still an extremely common limb equipment choice and are used for everything from climbing and foraging to attacking enemies. Digging is a common specialization for mammal players, with builds like the armadillo and anteater leveraging their claws to access hard-to-reach resources. At the extreme end of this ability, moles use their long, thick claws and sensory modifications to complete their entire playthroughs in subterranean maps, where they can farm out invertebrate players for XP. Other mammal builds spec into lighter claws to preserve dexterity and use them more in a generalist fashion, but this means they can only inflict minor scratch damage in combat situations. The cloven hooves of even-toed ungulate builds like pigs and deer technically are claws as well, which add cutting edges to already powerful limbs and increase the damage inflicted by kicks. Mammals in the Carnivora faction all have
That's a geek fight, right? Get out of here. I didn't know who's count as a claws, but I guess, sure, it makes sense. Damn. So claws are basically Swiss knife of the nature, right? Versatile at everything.
Claws, but only some are fully dependent on them to take down enemies. Felids have extremely sharp claws that retract when not in use, conserving their durability and allowing them to move silently when preparing to ambush an opponent. These claws provide additional traction and therefore movement speed when extended, but more importantly, they greatly increase both the damage and grappling capability of these felids. This grappling can be used in a deadly combination, where claws immobilize an opponent so the user can safely inflict lethal bite damage. They are also remarkably effective for climbing, which opens up access to areas of the map that other carnivore builds can't reach. With some of the best speed and power stats in the game, felids are absolute killing machines.
I never can get past how Jaguar basically takes a massive fucking deer and just climbs the tree, right? I mean, these felines, jaguars are really strong, right? I mean, you already know that. But just seeing somebody just taking somebody and just, fucking pull up in top of the tree, that's some next level shit, man. If you see that, I mean, you see in here like, yeah, all right, I've seen this, it makes sense. But if you see that live, right, that would be astonishing, like, goddamn.
That use claws to decimate bird and mammal player bases. For builds which lack the ability to retract their claws, the repeated contact with the ground causes them to become dull and less useful for climbing or combat, but they do still provide solid mobility bonuses. Since bird forelimbs are modified into wings, most avian builds can only equip functional claws to their feet. Hoatzins have the unique ability to equip claws to their forelimbs that are used for
reflexes.
climbing, but this ability is shed at higher levels in favor of flight, and all other birds are restricted to hind limb claws only. While this may seem like a limitation, members of the raptor faction use their claws and wings in conjunction to carry out some of the deadliest ambush attacks in the game. Their absolutely busted sensory abilities and mobility stats allow them to attack before an opponent can even detect their presence, impaling them with sharp talons before they have time to react and counter.
That is so fucked up, right? I'm seeing this video right here of the fox. That's a fox, right? I mean, Fox knew that there is no way in hell the fox can escape because there's nothing around there where it can hide, right? So it just runs away and just turns around and just try to prepare. That is so fucked up. You can't even see that shit, can you? That is so fucked up.
Busted sensory abilities and mobility stats
God, look at that.
Allow them to attack before an opponent can even detect their presence,
back. Oh, God.
impaling them with sharp talons before they have time to react and counterattack. However, raptor legs are relatively short and their wings can't deal much damage in their own right, which limits their ability to counterattack when an enemy launches an attack on the ground or from behind. In a major departure from the typical avian playstyle, some birds dump evolution points into their legs and feet at the expense of their flight ability. This strategy hinges on having a high enough run speed to evade most enemies, and enough power in their legs to disembowel enemies with dagger-like claws when challenged. Both types of avian builds can be viable against certain opponents, but their inability to inflict much damage with their wings leaves them vulnerable to rushdown and more powerful builds, and underscores the benefits of having claws equipped to all 4 limbs. Claws are an excellent weapon choice for players with the flexibility and limb lengths needed to maximize their threat range. But even on less mobile builds, they're still well worth the investment. These versatile weapons are at their best when they're used either as a safe, non-committal attack to chip away at an opponent, or as part of a grappling combination move that anchors an opponent in place while additional damage is inflicted by either teeth or stingers. As the top tier claw users, Felids are definitely OP, as they have pretty much the perfect setup to maximize the utility of their highly specialized claws. So don't expect to immediately skyrocket up the tier list the moment you spec into the Claws trait, as the Felid class may be a bit of an outlier. However, Claws are still a valuable addition to almost any build that can equip them, and cost very little in terms of evolution points considering how many new options.
What is that cord made of? That's a thin cord and somehow Bear is just hanging there? What the fuck?
And strategies they can add to a character. On the subject of claws, you may have noticed that I didn't discuss one of the game's most famous claws in this video. On that note, I have a bit of an announcement. I've been secretly working on something big, my own 3D animation studio. I want to make one of the best educational wildlife shows ever, and finally answer the types of questions that I constantly get asked. Who would win in a fight between... well, I mean, take your pick. So far, I've been limited in what I've been able to show on this channel, since many animals never meet, and are separated by either distance or time. Through the magic of 3D animation, I want to bring these confrontations to life for all of you to witness. The first episode will pit one of history's most lethal claws against one of prehistory's most deadly fangs. I've been working super hard, and although the first episode isn't quite ready, it'll be prepared.
Basically, saber, what is saber cat tiger, whatever that was, saber tooth tiger, right? Versus Kande Bengal tiger. Who would win? That kind of shit.
On Nebula soon, and I don't want you to miss it. Many of you know by now that TierZoo has been a longtime partner of Nebula, a creator-owned streaming service whose mission is to empower creators to make high-budget content that they couldn't otherwise. Well, I'm no exception, and I'm really shooting for the moon here. So please, check out the sponsor of today's video, the Nebula Curiosity Stream Bundle. Curiosity.
Yeah, people, go to curiositystream.com/TierZoo and support this channel. I guess I want to check that out, what kind of 3D version he made. But yeah, TierZoo is the first channel I started to react to about the zoo type of thing, animal thing. I never thought I would ever watch something like this, let alone react to it, right? I started with the TierZoo. I never was one of the guy who watches, like, you know, National Geography, wildlife type of videos. When I was a kid, I was just like, oh, that's just fucked up. A tiger running towards some deer and cutting it half, blood everywhere. Fuck that. I was never that guy, right? So just, you know, last year or 2 years ago, I don't know when I started doing this. I guess a year ago, when somebody first told me, like, do a TierZoo video. It was about something like a human, some kind of philosophical type of topic, right? Humans this, humans OP or whatever. So I started doing that, and then I realized, oh, look at that, these are really fun. Like, you know, he made it look like it's a game and it's a tier list and it's just fucking awesome. He talks about meta and how it's a server, right? So yeah, so claws are definitely OP. I mean, everybody knows, even kids know that, like, claws are OP. So yeah, this kind of makes sense. Alright, people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, check out the reaction I did this link in the description, check out the cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.